Alright YouTube, today's project is going to be engine swapping this Bilt 2660. It came with a 208cc Chinese engine from the factory. For whatever reason I can't get it to start. I don't know if it's blown or if it's got an electrical short somewhere. I've tried replacing the carburetor, the magneto, adjusting the valves, doing anything and everything I can think of to try and get this engine to start. And it won't. I paid $250 for this machine on Facebook Marketplace. It's in pretty good condition. Really no rust to speak of. And I've gone to Harbor Freight and picked up this 224cc Predator engine, supposedly 10% more output than the Predator 212cc engine. I did get this 212 yesterday on Facebook Marketplace for $100. But I am going to put the 224 onto the Snowblower. I think the red and black will match up nicely with the color scheme. Hopefully we can get our money back out of this machine. I also had to buy a couple of these pulleys because the output shaft on this 224cc engine is a 3/4 inch shaft, and I believe the shaft that comes with these Chinese engines is a 1-inch shaft. So rather than try and figure out the adapter that goes on here, I guess people in other videos have said the key on the output shaft is not tall enough to use the pulleys that come with the machine. So we're gonna put these pulleys on here. Part numbers, you can find them on Amazon. I'll see if I can add some screenshots or a link in the description to the video. Anyway, without further ado, let's take this engine off and we'll get started. First thing I'm going to do is take this belt guard cover off. You're going to need a 3/8 inch socket or a 10mm. Just 2 bolts holding that on. This will just come right off. We'll set that aside for later. So, as I was describing, the pulleys that come on or come with the machine from the factory are probably going to be a different size because of the output shaft. So hopefully I bought the right ones. We'll get to that part in just a bit. The next step is going to be removing these 2 bolts. They're 1/2 inch. This is also a 1/2 inch. And there's a larger bolt back here. And that is holding this whole assembly onto the front of the engine. I'm going to remove this bolt, take these pulleys off, and hopefully we don't have to crack the machine in half, meaning remove the bucket from the tractor portion of the snowblower. So I've got this belt tensioner removed. That goes to the drive belt. I took pictures ahead of time so that when I put this all back together, I know exactly how it's supposed to go back together. Had to use a 1/2 inch wrench to be able to get to this bolt. I used an impact for the top 2. And we have 1 left on the other side here. Of course, we can't see it from that angle. Got this 1 bolt left. Let's see if we can zoom focus in on that. And then that plate should come off, as well as the unit controlling the chute. As you can see, the drive belt is loose now that that tensioner is off. This last bolt here is a 3/4 inch. I'm going to use a ratcheting wrench to get in there and take that out. I've got that bolt out of there. Now this is all loose, and I think I'm just going to remove this whole assembly and get it out of the way. Just one little cotter pin right there. holding this shaft in place. I'm going to pop that out, slide the shaft out, and then this whole assembly should just come up and off of the unit. Just grab a pair of pliers, pull that cotter pin out. We'll set that aside for now. This just slides out. We'll leave that rod hanging free, and then this whole piece just comes right off of there. So now we have plenty of room to work. Next thing I'm going to do is use a 1/2 inch socket to take this bolt out. So this bolt holding the pulley in place is actually a 9/16, not a 1/2. But we're just going to reach right in there with the impact and pop that right off. Now, because this is a newer machine, this pulley isn't seized onto the output shaft like some of the older machines I've worked on. Anyway, I just slid the belts right off. This pulley comes right off of here. The other one is actually in 2 pieces. I'll take that off as well. Now I'm going to flip the machine onto the bucket, and we'll take the belly pan off, and we'll be able to get at the 4 bolts holding the engine in place. All right, now we've got the machine tipped onto the bucket. And of course, if you have gas in the tank or there's gas in the carburetor, it's all going to drip out. So a little towel down there to catch any drips that are coming down. Now we just take the belly pan off. It's held in place by 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. They're all 3/8. They should come right out. So once you have your belly pan removed, take a look and see what's going on in here. Everything looks like it's in pretty good shape. As I said earlier, this is a newer machine. Friction wheel is actually in really good shape. The only thing holding this engine on is these 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're 1/2 inch. So we're going to take those out. Then of course the engine is going to want to fall, so it's kind of a two-handed job. You could, I suppose, get a ratchet strap and strap that engine in place so that it does not fall forward when you do remove those 4 bolts. I'm going to do that off camera. You can do it however works for you. One more thing before you go removing this engine, you're going to want to unplug the wiring harness if your machine has one. In this case, this one goes to the headlight. I'm going to unplug that so that when the engine does fall forward and I go to catch it, I don't need my other hand to try and unplug this wiring harness. Alright, as you can see, the engine is taken off. I decided to put a couple of buckets there to help catch it when it fell forward. Now, here's the engine that came off of the machine. As you can see, the output shaft on the engine that came with the machine is a little bit bigger than the one that comes on the Predator engine. This is the 212. I'm putting the 224 on there, but they do have the same output shaft, which is why I ended up getting the different pulleys here. So hopefully I got the right ones. We'll find out in a minute. In the meantime, let's unbox this 224cc engine. Look at that. They even come with a carb kit for when your carburetor inevitably gets gunked up. That's cool. A few different jets in there. I'll have to check that out in a bit. Nice, a funnel. Wow, Harbor Freight's coming a long way. Extra parts that they did not used to include. All right, I'm going to need 2 hands for this, so We'll take that engine out and put it on the workbench. Look at this one and the 212 side by side. All right, here's the 224 fresh out of the box. A little quick start guide there. We'll give that to the new customer, whoever decides to buy this thing. It's about the same size really as the 212. Supposedly just a little bit bigger and better. Alright, we're starting to slowly get the new engine bolted into place. I am going to have to make a quick trip to the hardware store because I can get these two bolts in. Those are two of the original bolts that came with the old engine. The problem is, if we can see in here, this is one of the bolts. Got a nice little round hole for it to fit into. This one here is more oblong, and there's nothing for that bolt to grab into. So I'm going to run to the hardware store, grab a bolt that's a little bit longer than the original engine mounting bolt. About the same thickness, but a little bit longer, and we're going to get a lock nut and a washer to match it. We're actually going to get two of those, one for each side, and we can put the belly pan back on and flip the machine back upright and put it all back together. After a little trip to the local Ace in town, got some 1.5" by 3/8 bolts with lock nuts and lock washers. They are slightly longer than what came on the machine, so they should reach right through and solve the issue that we're having here. Let's see. Oh yeah. Come right out the other side here, and that lock nut should go on there nicely. So we'll put two of those in, tighten them down, and flip this baby back on its wheels. Alright, we've got those two bolts tightened down, so our engine is in place. While we're in here, just gonna put a little grease on this shaft. Not much. Just a little coating. And we'll put some on the gear as well. Doesn't have to be pretty. And then we'll button this thing back up. All right, on to the next step. These are the new pulleys that will be going on. These are the pulleys that came off the machine. The pulleys that came off the machine have a 1-inch opening. The key is built into the pulleys. The new pulleys have a 3/4 inch opening. The key fits in there. They also have these little Allen screw adjustments to tighten it down onto the shaft. This engine has a keyway opening on it. I believe the other one, the keyway is built right in. Let's see. No, it's not. It just fell out of there somewhere. Anyway, we're going to put these new pulleys on. I put this towel here so that if the key falls out of here, it doesn't fall down in. I don't have to take the belly pan off of the machine again to get that key out of there. All right, I've got the pulleys on here, and we're running into a little problem. Haven't tightened them down yet, but they don't quite line up right, which I find to be the case every time I use one of these Predator engines, whether I use the original pulleys, if it's a 3/4 inch shaft. There's always a little bit of an issue here. So what we're gonna do is make a couple spacers. You can use washers, you could use anything round, cylindrical. In my case, I'm gonna take this tool that God knows what it even came with. Probably bought some Chinese junk somewhere, and this tool came with it. So I'm just gonna cut a little piece off of there to put behind this pulley. Now I know they have the Allen key nuts on there, or bolts on there, but I feel like even if I tighten those down, they're not gonna keep those pulleys right where I want them long term. So I'm just gonna make a little spacer to put behind this one, and I'm gonna make one to put in between these two pulleys as well. All right, so I made a little spacer to go between the block and the first pulley. I'm gonna make another one to put between the two pulleys. All right, so we've got the first pulley on with the spacer. Everything lines up nicely. This is my other spacer that I just basically took my cutoff wheel, put this piece in a vise, and I'm just making pieces that will fit as spacers between the two pulleys. That slides on nicely there. And I'll put the other pulley on and should be ready to bolt it down. Alright, so I put the chute back on, and unfortunately the muffler cover is in the way. It's hitting this, so I can't tighten this bracket back down. But it looks like I can take this shroud off of the muffler and it might give me the clearance I need. Alright, so took the muffler shroud off, and now we have the clearance for that bracket. Alright, we've got this thing just about back together. This little belt tensioner here was quite the headache. It's got these little pins that have to be in just the right place. I am going to have to make one more trip to the hardware store. Unfortunately, this is the bolt that is supposed to go into the crankshaft here, and it's a little bit too big, so I found another small bolt laying around my garage that is the proper thread pattern. So I'm going to run to the hardware store, get a stainless bolt with that thread pattern, and finish this project up. Anyway, this little pulley here, let me see if I can get it with the screwdriver. This little arm has to be underneath. Zoom in just right. Can't get it to focus. This little arm has to be underneath the curved part of this bracket. And then this one, I'm gonna go around to the other side so you can see. This one has to be on top of that 3/4 inch bolt, sitting right in this little space, just like that. All right, after another little trip to the Ace Hardware store, got the appropriate bolt, 5/16. I think they're 1.5 inches. The ones I bought were. I got a couple extras for the next time I do a Predator swap. This is so hard to do one-handed. There we go. It's just gonna go right on there. Tighten that down. And we're ready to put oil in this thing and drag it outside, start it up. Tighten that down with my impact, and we'll fill it up and go outside with it and try it out. All right, we're filling it up with oil. This is the cool little funnel that they gave me in the box. Thing sits in there pretty nice. And on a side note, I did figure out where this came from. It in fact came with the Predator engine. When I took the rest of this box apart, I found this spark plug removal tool in this packaging. And of course, I don't end up using it for anything except they have a perfect 3/4 inch bore on the inside, so I make spacers when I have to put spacers over the top of these 3/4 inch crankshafts. So being that it's March 1st, I'm doing this engine change. I'm going to put some VP 94 octane ethanol free fuel into this tank because I doubt very much that I'm either going to use this snowblower again this year or be able to sell it for that matter. So it's probably going to sit until next winter, and hopefully I'll be able to command a price of $450 to $500 for the machine. Really not going to make any money on this. It was more about doing the project and seeing if these pulleys worked, which they seem to. We're going to find out shortly here. Stand by. All right, here we have it outside for the first start. Predator 224cc motor on a Bilt snowblower, and this should work on any of the Bilt, Craftsman, MTD brand snowblowers. Pretty much exactly how it worked today. They're all the same, they just have different stickers on them. So we'll turn our switch on. We did put 0.625 quarts of oil in there, 5W30, since we're going to be using it predominantly in colder weather. Throttle up, fuel on, we'll choke it, let that fuel drain down into the carburetor before I go pulling the cord a few times. Hopefully it'll just start right up on the first pull. Pretty sharp looking machine. I'll clean it up a little bit before I put it up for sale. Let's give it a rip. First pull.